a year full of deep turbulences.
Hunting for property in a community that prohibits rentals.
We are not living the final chapter. There are really more chapters to be developed.
Is this a common concern among clients right now?
This is quite revolutionary in a way.
So 2025 has definitely been one of the most chaotic years when it comes to rental regulations in Spain. It could not be a bigger mess. That's why today we've invited Miguel Manzanares from Manzanares Abogados to talk to us about the most recent changes. Are you guys ready? Let's go. Miguel, welcome back to the channel.
Thank you very much.
It feels like you're home. It's great to have you on.
It is. Thank you very much for that.
Just to give a bit of context to our viewers, we had a very messy year this year with rental regulations. At the end of last year, the government announced changes. In April, they implemented changes. In June, we had a conversation about it. And lately, on the 30th of July, so just a few months ago, there was a resolution which made things a bit more complex, or just added a bit more chaos to an already chaotic situation. Before we talk about the latest resolution and the latest news, Miguel, can we do a quick recap of what happened on the 3rd of April? And then we can talk about the new resolution.
Well, the regulation about short-term rental, about rentals of less than 60 days have been living, like you said, a year full of deep turbulences. And these turbulences were created by the necessity from the individuals, from the landowners, from the property owners that are expecting to rent out the properties. Originally it was a registry in each comunidad autónoma. Comunidad autónoma is like a state. We are 17 different kind of states, autonomías. And in each one of them that your property belonged to, you had to register like for a short-term rental. This was necessary with a number of requirements, like having a property that originally was having to have the license of first inhabitation. Then after that, this didn't have to have that license, but as long as the property complies with the legislation in planning, zoning, etc., and a number of other requirements. So the property was registered there, and the parliament, basically the legislation authorities, were giving to each one of the communities the capacity of prohibiting the short-term rental on that very community as long as there was a double quorum deciding about it. The double quorum is that more than 60% of property owners and more than 60% of number of units were voting against the short-term rental. That meeting had to take place, and that meeting has to be approved with that quorum to decide about the prohibition of that short-term rental. That was very important, and there was a change that was requiring also to have a central registry for the whole nation of Spain. It doesn't matter if you are of the Balearic Islands or Andalusia or Galicia. Everybody had to register the property like short-term rental, not just at the community that at the autonomía that you are part of, but also in Registro Único, like the central registry. So a few points to consider. The possibility of having a meeting of the community deciding this is not permissible anymore. It was irretroactive. So therefore, you can make up a decision about the majority of the community deciding about prohibiting that, but from that very day onwards. Not backwards. So if there was an owner, if there was a neighbor that had registered the possibility of renting short-term, and the decision comes after that, that person, that neighbor, is still able to rent it. So that was important. There was a kind of controverted matter at that point. That was if that very person that had the opportunity of renting out that property sells the property to somebody else, that person that becomes the new owner of that property could not really get the qualification for short-term renting.
So you would need to apply for a rental license again?
You need to apply at that very moment that you became owner of that property.
So the previous rental license would be invalidated, technically, on the transmission of the property.
Exactly, because the rationale behind it is that the set of rules governing that community at the very moment that new buyer becomes owner
Could have changed.
has prohibited already that the short-term rental. So therefore, if the general meeting of the community took place, let's say on the 20th of August, and that new owner becomes owner by the middle of September, that community is already prohibiting the short-term rental. And consequently, as a new buyer, as a new owner of that property at that very moment, has to respect the rules of that community. And so that was really a very clear picture of saying, okay, the community of owners can vote against it, but at least those very neighbors that were already renting out those properties with the legal registration in Junta Andalucía, with the legal registration in the Registro Único, they were allowed to keep renting out, even if there was a decision after that of prohibiting. But not the new owners. The new owners will have to face the kind of prohibition that they were governing the community. What Audiencia Nacional on the last 30th of July said is that the right of renting out doesn't have to be with the owner but with the property, because that property was in compliance with the law to rent out the property, and therefore consequently if a property that has already achieved the stamp of Junta Andalucía, the stamp of Registro Único, and that property can be rented out, even if the decision of the community of owners after that is prohibiting that, that property remains with the right of renting out the property. It doesn't matter who the owner of that property is. If so, therefore, this will really open up in a kind of revolutionary way because a property owner that has treasured and has retained and holds the right of renting out the property can really convey not just the title of ownership of that property, but also the right of renting out that property short term, even if the community of owners has decided afterwards that this is not permissible anymore.
So this is huge because, up until after April, we were looking for only, for example, clients to come to our agency, to our Rockstars, and they would ask for properties that they would be able to rent out. And essentially, we had to look for, let's say, communities that specifically allowed rentals. And now with this latest resolution on the 30th of July, where the license is linked to the property rather than the owner, essentially, someone could go out hunting for property in a community that prohibits rentals, but if the property they're buying already has a rental license in place, essentially they could buy the property and take over the rental license. Is that correct?
Essentially, that is 100% correct. Of course.
Sorry, Miguel, one thing is we're talking about the national license here, right? We're not talking about the autonomic license, correct?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the capacity of renting out that property short term. The thing is, this is quite revolutionary in a way, because this has been approved by Audiencia Nacional, which is considered a high court. High court, and Audiencia Nacional has above also Supreme Court. And we also have a constitutional court, right? But this is not really a constitutional matter, or could be. We lawyers always find a way to
to make it a constitutional matter.
Yeah. But anyway, so this is made by Audiencia Nacional, which is at national level.
Yeah.
It's kind of a high court. That above there is a Supreme Court. So this is very new resolution. Against this, I'm sure that will create again a wave of appealing and situations that will fight to get it changed somehow. But we cannot really say that this is the end of the story. This is the very end of it. I'm sure that we will face some more chapters, but this could really be very interesting, because the property that many people that were looking to buy a property with the possibility of renting out were looking to go to those very communities that the president and administrator able to grant a certificate saying you can rent out at my community. And at this moment, according to this resolution, we could potentially look for properties that you say, okay, I found a property that everything is clean and excellent from a legal point of view, but also the vendor is able to give me the final registration at Junta Andalucía and Registro Único, and therefore, as a new owner of this property, I can really take over that right that the seller is passing to me.
But do you consider that to be clear, black and white at the moment, or do you still consider it to be a sort of grey because it still hasn't got to a higher court? So if you were to receive a client today that, for example, buys an apartment in a complex, let's call it, any complex in the Costa del Sol, the complex does not allow rentals, but he has a rental license in place. Would you consider it, let's say that with this new resolution, he is able to purchase that property and take over that license and keep on operating on that license? Is it black and white or not really?
It is not black and white.
Okay.
It is not black and white in that categorical way, because it's subject to another reviewing and appealing at Supreme Court stage, which we don't know what is going to happen. So therefore, like I said, we are not leaving the final chapter. There are really more chapters to be developed, but this really a strong argument. This is really a high court. It's not really very, we are talking about a very high level institution that has given a very well argumented number of things, statements, by which this has got to be permitted. And therefore, we tend to believe that this is going to be as well taken over by Supreme Court if this escalates to Supreme Court. So it's not the final chapter, but it's most likely the way that this should be regulated. Having said that, though, every single case is different. If you go to a community that the seller is renting out that property, has correctly registered everything in both registries, Andalusia and the Central Registry, and you live in a community that is not full of controverted polemics matters, therefore I would say that you are most likely able to take over the existing license and then you keep renting. But if you sometimes are going into communities in which we, by curiosity, we read the last 3 years of the minutes of AGM, general meetings of the community. The way that, why we read the last 2 years, and sometimes it's very heavy documentation and discussions and polemics and so on. So we have to read a lot of documents because we need to learn what's going on. If the matter of renting out is something that is not really discussed, it's not really of the of the concern of the neighbors, or if this is the key element of the neighbors that they are completely against it and have been prohibited, and there is a polemic of certain neighbors that are trying to enforce that decision. So therefore we got to see case by case, right? Having said that, though, we received that like extraordinarily good news, because you don't need to apply again another license at the point in which the community is against it. So the property had the license, and that property can continue the renting out.
You're saying in the case that the community has, let's say, big polemics around rentals?
Yeah, if there is a polemic about rentals, we have to warn the clients that
it could be a problem.
We can do it, we should do it, but we have to be prepared to face potential issues with the neighbors and the community president and administrator.
Is this a common concern among clients right now, in your people that buy with Manzanares? Is it a conversation you have a lot with clients, people that are a bit concerned with, their rental options? For some of them it's really quite important. For some of them are not that important, because many people are willing to use and enjoy the property for good periods of time. Also, let's not forget something. It looks like everything is permitted short-term or long-term. There is another type of rental in the middle, which is that one after 60 days, in between 60 days to 11 months, which is the medium term. And many properties are preferably rented out in a medium term
because some people are coming to enjoy Spain, not just 5 days or 3 days, but maybe 2 or 3 months, 5 months, this kind of thing. So therefore, for some people, they say, okay, I want to have the opportunity of renting out short term, but if not, my goal and my idea is not renting out short term, but mid to long term.
Right, so Miguel, thank you so much for the update. It's great to have you, back in High Homes headquarters. It's great to sort of, get all that knowledge and wisdom from you and share it with our audience. So thanks for joining. And I will wrap by telling you guys, like always, I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please press that button, like our video. And if you're new to this space, you can go ahead and subscribe to the High Homes channel, where we will keep you guys posted with information regarding Spanish real estate, Spanish property news, and everything regarding real estate in Spain. So with that, guys, hasta la próxima. Adiós.
Adiós.